Hello there and welcome to Dazatron's Diorama Llama, and this is my first how-to video. So in this first video I'm going to show you how to make a basic stand for your figures. So as you can see, this will fit a standard deluxe, which looks pretty cool in my opinion. It would also fit nicely legend scale if you are a third-party legend scale collector, or you might not be a Transformers collector at all and you might collect other figures. So even a regular pop figure like this, I just think it adds something to that figure and makes it stand out and just elevates it, makes it look a little bit more special, which is what we're trying to do. So to get started on this, some of the equipment you will need, and I would ask you to check out my basic tools video, which you'll see on the channel, and there's also a welcome video there just explaining what this channel is about if you haven't checked that out already. So yeah, do have a look at those videos if you haven't done so already, because that will give you some of the basic setup. However, as I said in the basic tools video, you don't need a lot of equipment just to get going. The key thing is styrofoam, so you will need to pick up some of that. I order mine online and I will put a link in the description below. I order mine from a site called Till Gear. But I'm sure there are other sites, and if I find any, again I'll put them in the description so you can get to those quite easily. When you order styrofoam, it comes in large sheets like this. You can see this fills up most of the screen here, and I've already used a little bit, as you can see there, but you could easily get 20 of the bases that I'm going to make today. So this kind of size here, which is about 4 inches by 4 inches. So yeah, so 20 of those out of one of those sheets, and those sheets cost about £10.95 if I remember right. So that's not bad going really. 20 bases for about £11 I think is a good price. So that's the first step. You will need styrofoam, because that essentially is the main material that I use for any of my bases. The rest of the materials, or tools if you like, is simply a knife of some sort. So this is a standard kitchen knife, which will work. I tend to use a floristry knife like this one here. I just find that it cuts through the styrofoam a little bit easier. You will need a knife sharpener of some description. Again, just because you tend to blunt the knives quite easily when you start cutting into the styrofoam, so to have one of these at hand is really useful. You'll need a pen just to draw onto the styrofoam. You'll need some sort of measuring tape or ruler to measure out your base, and then you'll also need some sandpaper, just to do a quick kind of sand job, just to kind of get the top quite smooth. But yeah, that's about it. So you don't need a lot to get going. If you look in the basic tools video, there are other things I've mentioned, like using files and things like that, and paints that you might need. But just to get going, you don't actually need a lot of equipment. So I've already measured and cut just with a regular saw the styrofoam. It cuts really easy. I'm not much of a DIY person, so I don't have a lot of tools in the house, but I do have a basic saw, so I was able just to cut that to shape. So again, you don't need lots of equipment if you haven't got it at hand. You can see here there's two different types. So I've got a slanted version here. You could do a circular version. I quite like this shape because you can kind of put them together, and you could create a row of these on a Billy bookshelf or a Detolf shelf, and you could have those going along the shelf, and just again to create a bit of elevation for your figures. So if you've got lots of figures on a shelf and it's quite hard to see some of those figures, this is a really good way just to kind of push up some of those figures, and actually works out cheaper than buying the plastic uprises that you can get from Amazon and other places like that. I think it creates a bit more interest, and it's quite nice that you've made it yourself. So that's why I use these square shapes, but there's lots of ways you can do this, and as you get used to making these, you can experiment and try out your own ideas. So it's the basic square version I'm going to show you today. So the first thing you need to do is, once you've got your square cut out, is you just need to measure how thick you want, if you like, the metal part to be. Okay, this bit here, which looks like it's part of the arc, which is the idea. So if I just get my measuring tape, and so the measurement for that on mine is just about 1.5 centimeters, but you can make that as thick or as thin as you like. I wouldn't go too thin, so certainly no less than 1 centimeter. So because I want mine to match up with this, I'm going to keep it about the same height, so 1.5 centimeters. So I'm just going to take my tape, and I'm just going to put a mark on the front here where I can see 1.5 centimeters, and do that all the way around. Now you will notice there's a lot of rough edges to the styrofoam from where I've cut it with the saw, and the great thing about this, it really doesn't matter at this stage, even if you haven't cut it that well, which I haven't actually. If you have a look at mine, you'll see that the sides are a little bit slanted, and that's the great thing about this, it really doesn't matter, because you're going to create this kind of, I suppose, rock kind of formation on the outside. So it's really just the top that you want smooth, and that's already reasonably smooth anyway. You will notice on the styrofoam there is a kind of a rough cut at the bottom, so that's got a bit of a texture to it. And if you wanted to create a stony finish, then I would suggest even starting with that part. Because I want a smoother finish on the top, I'm going to go with the smoother side, as you can see here. So it's important to think about that, particularly when you're measuring the thickness of the top here. So once I've done that, I'm then just going to draw a line. So I'm just going to use this ruler here, because that's what I've got at hand. So I'm just going to draw a line going across. So as you can see, I've just measured that, and I've drawn a line all the way around my block. So next thing to do is to take my knife. So I'm just going to give it a very quick sharpen here. Move that out of the way. And so now I'm just going to make a cut. So it's my first cut along the line that I've drawn out. And this will help when I come to create the rock formation. So just so you know, I'm in my daughter's bedroom at the moment, hence why we've got the pink and grey wallpaper. It's just the quietest room in the house at the moment. So I'm just cutting into that line. Also, if you can hear chirping in the background, my daughter has a gecko, so that's the crickets I'm going to sing along. Here we go. So I've just cut into that line. You probably can't see that, but that will help when I come to start cutting the rock formation, and then it just kind of makes this kind of top part here stand out. So the next thing to do is you're going to cut into this line again, but at an angle. So I'm just moving my knife so below the line, and then I'm just going to slice. See if you're kind of peeling an apple. So I'm just using as much of that edge as I can, and just kind of digging that out a little bit. And because I've already cut that line, you can see that comes off really easy. And again, you don't have to be neat and tidy with this. You just want that top line to look straight. But because we've already put this score line in place, that should stay reasonably straight, whereas the bit at the bottom, it doesn't matter if that's jagged. In fact, it actually adds to the effect. You can see now this just makes this top part kind of stand out. So we've got a separated the metal part of the arc in this case to this kind of what will be kind of the rock formation. So as you can see, that was quite easy. What I would do a bit later on is just kind of sand off some of these rough parts, but I'll come back to that a little bit later. What I want to show you first is just how to make some of these marks or these shapes in here. And this is probably the bit that looks a bit scary. It looks really difficult. I must admit, when I first tried it, I was a bit intimidated by it, but actually as you get into it and you start cutting, you just tend to get a feel for it really. So what I tend to do, I tend to just kind of cut from different angles. So I'm just going to make a cut and then cut from the opposite angle. So you can see there, just kind of got this initial cut. I'm going to do the same, slightly different angle this time. So again, an initial cut, and then tilt the blade at an angle, and again cut in, just like what we did for the top here. Don't worry about going quite deep on this, because all of that will add to the effect. So again, so the whole idea with this video is I'm hoping that you'll look at this and think, I can do that. And that's the idea really. If I can make this look as simple as possible, then I'm hoping, yeah, you won't be intimidated by it and you think I can have a go at that. So already it's just created a bit of shape to that bottom part. Obviously it doesn't really look like rocks at the moment, but it looks a little bit more interesting to look at. So the next task is just to continue to dig in and pull out parts and just get some shapes to what you've got. So probably the easiest place is to start with the corners. So I'm just going to, again, just cut into a corner and just kind of dig out a little bit of a shape there, an indent, and it would just kind of create a more kind of rocky finish, if that's the right word. So I can take a bit off the corners. I tend to leave the bottoms pretty flush and pretty straight. I tend to take off the top and the bottom. So just making a few little cuts. Again, just to get rid of those sharp corners. I just think that kind of makes it look a little bit more rock-like. So if I just tilt that round, you can see those corners there. So just take a chunk out of each edge or each corner, and then we just continue this process now. So if you imagine each one of these like a big boulder or a big rock, we just want to add some texture to that. So again, just slice, different angles, take out a chunk. Again, don't worry about keeping this neat because it's the kind of the haphazard kind of quality to it that makes it work, or makes it look a bit more like a rock. So I'm just kind of tilting mine at different angles. So you can see there, look, already just by scraping some of these bits, you're kind of creating textures to it, and it kind of makes it look like, you know, there's a whole bunch of kind of stones on top of one another here. And you just continue to do that around the whole of this bottom area of the base. So even with this first kind of cut, you can see already that looks a lot better. So that was done very quickly, probably 5 minutes at the most. Just kind of digging in different angles, pulling bits out, keeping it very loose. In fact, you know, again, those little bits, the rough bits, kind of add to it. It looks like little bits of debris, little stones. So all of that will add to the texture. So yeah, don't worry about that at all. You also don't want it to look uniform, so you don't want it to look exactly the same. You don't want it to be symmetrical. Yeah, try different angles. You might want a big stone at the end, or you might want to make some smaller kind of areas. Yeah, it really is up to you, I suppose. But yeah, it looks better when it's a bit more asymmetrical, and there's a bit of variety there. So I could still work back into that. I could get some deeper areas into some of the rocks just to make it look more interesting. So really it depends how much time you want to spend on this, but I actually think if you painted that up, that would look pretty good actually as it is. It just needs a bit of sanding at the top. So of course for that part you will just need some different weights of sandpaper. So again, I just got an assorted pack. I think this was from Wilkinson's. Look, yes, this was just Wilkinson's assorted aluminium oxide paper, and there's a fine grit, medium and coarse, 180, 120 grit and a 60 grit there, but I don't think it really matters too much. Tend to start with a coarser grit just to get some of the rougher areas off, particularly as I said, when you get styrofoam you get a rough edge and a smoother edge. So this is the rough edge at the moment, and I've also got the edge where I cut it with a saw, so that's also going to be quite rough. So what I don't want to be doing is sanding down the rocky parts. I want to keep them rough. I just want to sand this area here. So I've just done a bit of sanding now on each corner and on the edges, just kind of smooth that out a little bit, and I just think that works with the kind of finish that we want. Then the top here, although it looks quite smooth, it has still got a texture to it. I don't know if the camera will pick that up. There you go. So you can see these little kind of little pits in the top there. So I'm just going to take a fine sandpaper. This one here. Take a larger piece, and I'm just gonna go over the top there, okay, just to take off some of that texture. Okay, I think that's looking pretty smooth now. You can see it's got a nicer finish at the top. Now, what I would say is don't feel you've got to get rid of every single dent or scratch or mark. I actually think all of those little indents, marks, holes add something to the character of the piece. And, you know, in the Transformers world, if this was the Ark, you'd probably find bullet holes and scrape marks, where people, you know, the characters have been fired at. So yeah, so all of that adds some interest to it. So I wouldn't worry too much about how smooth you can get this, and again, definitely leave the roughness for the bottom part of your base. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to tidy up my space a little bit, just so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so going back to the original base here, it's just good to add some interest to the top. I don't know what you would call these lines on a spaceship, but you tend to see them a lot in kind of science fiction movies, and it does add a bit of interest to the top there rather than being quite plain as it is now. So what I tend to use for the circles is I look for anything around the house, like a lid, a plastic lid that would give me that kind of shape. So this is the top of a detergent bottle, so you can see that's quite a decent size, and that's what I used to create that shape there. If you wanted a smaller circle, you could use the top of a this was a sunflower oil bottle, I think one of the fry lights. So it really depends on you, or you could even do a circle within a circle if you wanted to. The only thing to be careful of is because styrofoam is quite soft, and this itself, we're just kind of making an indent. It's not actually a cutter of any sort. In fact, if you had maybe kind of cookie cutters that are circular, that would work really well, but I don't know if you'd get any that small, to be honest. So what you're doing is you're really kind of just scratching into or pressing into the styrofoam to get your shape. So if you press too hard, you might find that you can kind of create a bit of damage to the shape, and you can see on here it kind of gives you a bit of a rough edge. I quite like that, but all I'm saying is just be a little bit careful with that. So yeah, I'm going to put it in, I think I'm going to put one in the middle actually, why not. So I'm just going to turn this piece here, and you can see actually that pushed through quite easily. Just going to straighten it up a bit. So if I pull that out now, you can see that's left a nice indent or line inside here. And I think what I would like is maybe a line coming down here off to the side, just to make it more interesting. So what you can do is use your ruler first to kind of make the shape that you want. Okay, that looks okay. So I've not really measured that, just done it by eye. So try that again. Again, just to add a bit of interest, a bit of shape to the top. And then to create those lines, this is a kind of a scribing tool or an etching tool. You could use a kebab stick, it would work just as well, and it's just to make an indent again into the styrofoam, so you don't, it doesn't have to be metal. So I'm just going to press lightly. What I'm not trying to do is scrape with the point, because if I do that, if I just use this bit of scrap here, you'll find it's quite scratchy. Now when you're adding details to rocks, that works quite well, but when you want a smooth line, I find it's better to kind of lie, I suppose, press the kebab stick, or the scribe in this case, as flat as you can. So you just kind of, I don't know if you can see that, I'm just a little bit closer. So I'm just pulling along my guidelines here, but I'm holding it quite flat, I'm not using the point. So it's just kind of creating this indent. And we're going to do the same again on this side here. Hold it down as flat as I can. And then you can just kind of work back into that if you want to. If you've got any of these small files, so find a thin one here. So you can pick up these sets. This is in my basic tools video. You can get these for about £4 for a set of 6 different files, and you can then just kind of work into that line there and just make that a little bit wider if you wanted to. You might be happy with the thickness of just using a tool like this, so it really is up to you what you do with that. But when you come to paint this, that way again, it will just add a bit of detail to it, and it will make it stand out a little bit more. Wherever you do finish on top, it is worthwhile just bringing the line down the side. So I'm just going to do that now. Okay, so we've got the detail on the top. And what you can do is you can try and match up your lines to the lines that are on other bases that you've made. So I did that with this one here. So I matched that one up so it joins together. You don't have to, it's completely up to you. It just gives you some choices. But I quite like the fact that you can kind of move these around and create different shapes with them when you're creating your own setup or presenting or displaying your toys however you want to. So you can see actually quite a short space of time. That's taken me about 40 minutes to get to that point, and that's reasonably finished for the modelling stage. Obviously it needs a lick of paint, which I'll do another video on that, but really when it comes to the rock formation, you can put as much time or as little time as you want for that, but even at this stage, 40 minutes in, I think that looks pretty cool. But if you wanted to curve those rocks a little bit more, get a bit more texture to them, then you can do that. It's up to you. So I hope you've enjoyed the first how-to video. Look out for the painting video, which will be up next, and I'll show you how to use the dry brush technique and doing a base layer and so on. So thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.